Hi and welcome back. This is our series on our rights under Section 12, rights during custodial interrogation. Okay, so let us now proceed with um, discussing this right. No, as we have already started discussing, no, this is basically citizens' rights when they are held in custody, no, and they are being interrogated. It is basically a right to ensure that a person is not being compelled to confess. So this is a right against compelled confession. Now, when we talk about confessions, confessions are not just always about oral confessions. There are different types of confessions. So the guarantee is not just against oral confessions, but all kinds of confessions. So let us look at some of the cases. Okay, in People versus Lugo, this is an assigned case, so you should have read this. He was arrested, and then he supposedly confessed without counsel, but worse than that, he was taken to the crime scene, where he was compelled to reveal the cadaver of the victim. Okay? And here the Supreme Court said that forcing him or compelling him to reveal the location of the body is in the nature of a confession by deed. By showing them where the body was, he was in effect confessing to the crime. And since he was compelled to confess without assistance of counsel, that was held to be inadmissible against him. Okay? In People versus Luvendino, he was arrested for rape and homicide, and he was brought to the crime scene where the police compelled him to reenact how it happened. Okay, so again, the Supreme Court said by compelling him to reenact, he was compelled to confess to the crime. And since it was done without counsel, it was held to be inadmissible. In People versus Wong Chen Ming, there were a group of tourists that came from Hong Kong, and then the customs officer who was inspecting their luggage noticed that all of them seemed to have the same kind of cereal in their bags. So this made the customs officer suspicious. So she opened it, and when she opened one, she saw that there was a white crystalline substance, and so she opened the rest. And all those in the tourist group had the same cereal box with the same, and then when opened, it contained the same white crystalline substance. So they were brought inside to be investigated, and then they were asked to sign the boxes as proof that these boxes were taken from their luggage. Right? And this was done without assistance of counsel. Now, the Supreme Court said that making them sign the boxes is compelling them to confess. Right? And therefore, the signature becomes inadmissible in evidence. Please take note, however, please take note that what is inadmissible only is the signature on the boxes. Right? Why? Because it was the seizure of the shabu in this case was a result of a valid warrantless search. Remember, customs searches is an exception. It doesn't require a warrant. So the search was valid, therefore, the evidence obtained is admissible. But making them sign is making them confess. So the signature is inadmissible, but the shabu itself and the boxes are admissible in evidence because they are a result of a valid search. Similarly, in Marcelo versus Sandigan Bayan, this was the time class when our relatives from overseas would send us money through the snail mail. What they would do is they would put money, cover it with paper, then put it in with the letter, and then send it to the Philippines. So a lot of post office employees before were caught because they were looking through the envelopes, and if they see there's money, they're going to open the letter and take the money. Now, the accused here were already being suspected of doing that. They didn't know that, but they were already under surveillance. So, from the Makati Post Office on their motorcycle, they went out and they decided to stop somewhere in Salcedo Village where they started opening letters, not knowing that they were under surveillance and the police were watching. So as they were opening the letters, the police caught them in flagrante delicto. Okay, so they were caught. Now, unfortunately, after they were caught, they were compelled to sign the envelopes as proof that these were the envelopes that they opened when they were arrested. Okay? Again, Supreme Court said, compelling them to sign is compelling them to confess. Okay? Therefore, the signatures on those envelopes were held to be inadmissible. However, just like the earlier case, no, please take note, the letters themselves are admissible evidence. Why? Because they were taken after they were arrested in flagrante delicto. So the seizure of the letter was a consequence or that came after a valid arrest. So it is an incident to a legal arrest, and therefore the letter themselves are admissible, although the signature of the accused on the letter is inadmissible. In People versus Macabalang, the Supreme Court again said that the practice of making the accused sign after a buy-bust operation, the property of receipt of property seized, is in the nature of a compelled confession. Of course, when you sign a receipt, and admit by signing that that illegal objects were taken from you, you are being made to confess to that crime. So, making you sign that, the receipt, okay, is compelling you to confess. So, the signature itself is inadmissible. However, the rest of the evidence, if they were taken properly, okay, will not be affected. It's just the signature, because that is the one where you were compelled to confess. Okay, again, in Hawaii Pang, the Supreme Court explained this, that compelled confessions are inadmissible against a person who was made to confess illegally. But that does not affect the other evidence that may have been taken legally. Okay? So, don't get confused. Okay? Evidence that are excluded because of Section 12 will be excluded. They will be inadmissible. But the other evidence that were taken, let's say, as a consequence of a legal arrest, or while they were arrested in flagrante delicto, those would be admissible evidence. Right? Now, let us look at some examples of illegal confessions. In People versus Kagiwa, right, the accused was arrested. He was interrogated in Tagalog. The problem was he didn't speak Filipino that well because he was a 19-year-old who just arrived in Manila from Samar. And then he was compelled to sign a statement with waiver of counsel. Right? Without counsel, of course. So is that a valid confession? No. It is an invalid confession, and the waiver was not executed knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently made. Of course, this was prior to the 1987 Constitution. Like I told you earlier in the earlier video, there were many cases where people were asked to sign waivers, compelled to sign waivers. But now that is no longer possible because to waive counsel, you must be assisted by counsel. In People versus Bandula, here he was arrested, detained, and tortured, and then he was compelled to sign a confession. To make it appear like a legal confession, they requested the assistance of a municipal attorney so that the confession will be signed by counsel. Okay. So, did the prosecution succeed in making that confession legal? No. Why not? Because the Constitution requires an independent and competent counsel. Okay? A municipal attorney cannot be considered independent because as a municipal attorney, it is his duty to execute the law. Okay? So he cannot be one who will represent someone who allegedly violated the law. That is not an independent counsel. Therefore, the confession was held to be invalid and inadmissible. Okay? In People versus Kidato, he was first interrogated by the police without counsel. He was then compelled to sign a confession. When he was compelled to sign the confession, then they called the POW lawyer. The POW lawyer naman, not considering or thinking about his duty, signed as if to make it appear that he assisted the accused while he was being interrogated. But the Supreme Court said, This is not allowed. Okay? A confession made without counsel is inadmissible. The subsequent appearance and subsequent assistance of counsel will not cure, okay, the interrogation, the illegal interrogation that earlier happened. I remember that counsel must be there from the beginning to the very end. If at any point counsel has to leave, then the interrogation must stop. Okay? Because any minute where counsel is not present would taint the entire confession. In People versus Tampos, this is a case where it happened inside the jail. No? An inmate was killed. He was taking a shower. 2 inmates attacked him and killed him. Immediately after the incident, as the guard was reacting, hearing that there was a commotion, he went inside. The 2 confessed and told him, pinatay namin siya. Okay? And then subsequently, there was an investigation. And in the investigation, again, they admitted that pinatay namin siya. Okay? But, when they were charged, they questioned their own admission. Okay? Sabi niya, inadmissible yung admissions na yon because it is custodial interrogation, and therefore, because it was done without counsel, then it cannot be admitted into evidence. Okay? Is he correct? Supreme Court said, no. There were 2 confessions here. The first confession was immediately after the killing. Salubong niya yung guard, sinabi niya, pinatay ko to. Is that a confession? Sabi ng Supreme Court, no, because he was not taken into custody, nor was he asked any question. So, is it admissible? Supreme Court said, yes, it is admissible as part of the res gestae. The concept of res gestae, class, you will learn this in evidence, no? Diba? This is an exception to the hearsay rule. What is this concept, no? In law, we believe, no, that utterances made in a sudden and after a sudden and surprising incident, okay, is part of the incident itself. It's part of the res gestae. So let us say I'm talking to you, you're facing in front of the road, no? I am facing the school, UP, you're facing the road. And then suddenly you screamed, ay, yung bata na sagasaan ng kotse. Okay. I didn't see that. I heard you say that, but I didn't see na yung bata na sagasaan ng kotse. By the time I looked back, all I could see was the car and the injured child. I saw the plate number of the car. If, for example, for whatever reason, you couldn't testify. Can I testify? I can testify to the fact that you screamed, ay, yung bata sinagasaan ng kotse. But that's hearsay. Well, normally, that is hearsay. But because it was uttered in a surprise after and immediately after a surprising event, okay, the law considers the utterance as part of the event. So I, who heard you say that, who heard the utterance, can testify. And that is part of the res gestae. That's not hearsay. Okay? Because I have personal knowledge of the fact that you uttered it. And that because you uttered it in such a circumstance, that is evidence that can be admissible. So in this case, the Supreme Court said, the utterance, ako pinatay ko siya, is not a confession, but rather a part of the res gestae and therefore admissible. Okay, so that is the second part of our series. We will continue with the videos about Section 12, no? A few more videos for us. Thank you very much.